Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Well, Sean, thanks for that lovely introduction. As always, it is the highlight of my day. And with me tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with...
Ed Sales, I'm back.
Wow, Ed, your voice gets deeper every time I hear it on the good old webcams here. Are you taking some kind of supplement for that?
Not currently, but it is something on the doctor's to-do list.
Well, welcome back to the show, Ed. We are excited to have you back. I know you've been busy with real life, and the twins, they have made their appearance, so I hope they're doing well tonight and on the mend.
Yep, they're both doing well. They're both still in the NICU, but they are improving and getting better.
Well, that's good to hear. You can't keep the sales down. And with that, our topic for tonight is a look into the German book that's coming up from mid-war, or for late war.
But you know, this kind of feels a little unfamiliar for me. Isn't there supposed to be some kind of joke coming my way?
Oh, I mean, if you want a joke, I've got jokes. So, Ed, have you ever been to the Apple Store?
I can't say that I have.
I know you're at the very cusp of millennial here, but if you were to go to an Apple Store and you saw a robbery, would that make you an eyewitness?
Aha, it probably would.
I've never been to the Apple Store. I've walked by one before, but I have an iPhone. Does that make me a millennial?
Yeah, probably. I'm more of an Android guy.
Well, you can't save everyone. I know we're going to talk about the German book tonight, and we'll get around to that. But I thought it would be kind of cool if we went over Historicon and kind of what we saw. That's the last big tournament we both were at.
Yep.
What did you run at Historicon, Ed?
I ran the L640s at Historicon. My good pride and joy, and probably the last time I run them at Historicon or any a tournament for a while.
Why do you say that? Is it? Are we seeing the end of the light tank swarm? Because as we talk about this, ETC is about to happen in just like a next day or two. And if you look at those lists, there are a ton of those little itty bitty swarm armies. Do you just see it as just not useful anymore, or are there better things that we can take now?
You know, I'm not going to say there's better things that we can take now. I think that the light tank hordes BAMs are still useful. I think the trend you're starting to see in tournaments now are people take medium to heavy tanks, and your light tanks just can't put out the firepower to reliably stop a medium tank, and you can forget about dealing with heavy tanks. You know, most lists can only take one thing that's really actually going to stop a heavy tank, and that's going to be your martyrs. You could take an M10 formation, and that could probably count as a medium tank formation, but you know, in our area, and really across the entire North America, you're seeing just medium tanks start to rise again. And, you know, I know the trend in Europe is a lot of, you know, light tank spam lists. So I'm going to be curious to see and watch the Panzer III list and how they do at ETC.
I think they're going to do well. I mean, we saw James Best Sr. He was the guy that took it at Mid-War Nationals this year. And those PZ3s, you know, at 5 points apiece, they are just good enough to be useful, and they're going to crush Stuarts. They're going to crush L6s because they're not going to take the return fire. And if you match them up with those armored cars and those L640s, or even just match them up with Martyrs and Dianas and a Tiger or a Ferdinand for that matter, it's a decent tank. And the same thing for the Allies with the Shermans and Churchills and the Lees. I think we are seeing a change in what is popular at our tournaments in the area. And with more and more people bringing those, you can't reliably just hope that you're going to run into an infantry formation with no tank support. So,
right.
I won't call the meta shift just yet, and I feel like if we ever say the word meta shift, we need like an air horn or something like that in post production. But I don't think we're seeing that quite yet. But it is definitely trending to see more medium armor in a list, and with that, at Historicon, I was surprised to see so many people brought the Ferdinands. I did not actually think to see them because I personally have a strategic withholding. I don't like to play heavy tanks, and I count a Ferdinand as a heavy tank at tournaments. But I'll tell you, I played Joe Lewis in a round at in the doubles, and his Ferdinands we could not budge them. They were such a game changer that we just couldn't do anything without getting schwacked by them. So now that people are bringing those, I think it's important that you have to think about all that medium stuff.
Yeah, and I was actually had to say that I was surprised about a number of things I saw. It was the first time I saw someone run British Shermans. I saw Nashorns. I saw the Panzer III Bogwards, which really surprised me and how effective they were. It nearly broke both my formations in turn one with a surprise ambush of the rushing the Bogwards forwards. That's one of the great things I love about going to the larger tournaments is you get to see a lot of different play styles, a lot of different lists. It's different than playing the same old person who runs the same old list at your local club. You get a lot of different play styles and a lot of different lists and a lot of different things you haven't seen before. It's really one of my favorite things about the larger tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I got to see some pretty neat stuff. Like my first round at Nationals, at the Mid-War Nationals, I got to play against an Italian list. And the last time I played against an Italian list was Historicon of 2018. So we just don't have many people in my area that play them. So I was able to get and see an army I don't get to play very often. And, it challenges you. It makes you a better player. All those things you have to say. But it's just fun. It's fun to play new people. It's fun to play new lists. And, I want to hear more about these Bogwarts that almost broke your formation in turn one.
Yeah, so I was playing against a guy named Tim. And, he had a Panzer Grenadier formation and a Panzer III's the Bogward formation. And it ended up defending and counterattack. So I'm like, oh man, I'm just going to run straight at the objective. And I use a couple of my Spearhead and a couple of armor cars and L640s to kind of branch out into the no man's land towards that objective, making them think that I was going to go full force to that objective. And I ended up putting everything against his other objective and just rushing it. And he dropped an ambush, which was the Panzer III's and the Bogwards in the forest. When he was able to send 3 of the 4 Bogwards out of the forest. The 4th one got bogged down, and or actually got stuck in the forest, couldn't exit. And when they came out, you get defensive fire when it charges a contact, but if you kill it, he gets a chance to roll a 1 or a 2, and then it's a template weapon. And it was just, I think I lost 7 L640s, a Semivante, 3 out of my 4 half tracks, with 1 or 2 of the infantry dudes dying. My KV was bailed. I lost a platoon of armor cars, with several other bailed. I almost lost both formations very quickly.
And that's ridiculous for a 1 point addition, 1 point per model addition.
And I got lucky. That 4th one that bogged in the woods, next turn, I shot it and killed it. And he unfortunately rolled a 1. It blew up, killed the HQ and the Panzer platoon in the woods. And there went that formation. It was insane. It really was.
So even in your turn, you were losing models.
Oh, yeah.
It's not every day that happens. But again, it's good to see. It's good to see because I had read about them. I've never actually seen them on the table. So.
Amazing. It really has inspired me to look at building that formation just for the fun that it could be.
You're convincing me. I might have to go and look at these around, see if they have any at my local store. But with that, I played my Honey Stewarts and M10s. This is my go-to list in mid-war, and I'll agree with you, Ed. I think it's getting harder and harder to run those light tanks because people are forcibly bringing medium tanks. So it's made me look at possibly running a Sherman formation with infantry support, which will be fun. I have these Shermans that I've had and I've never played, but I will be playing in late war because Shermans are ridiculously inexpensive.
Yeah, I mean, the Shermans aren't bad. I just honestly, compared to some of the other tanks, I kind of hate how expensive they are. But I mean,
they're 3 points cheaper than Churchills, so why would you just not pay 3 points more to get a Churchill and have 2 more front armor and 1 more side armor? Or 3 more side armor.
And the way I look at it is I just take they're the same points as M10s, and it really M10s are with the +1 to their front armor, the ability to blitz and then shoot and scoot. I mean, it's honestly, to me, it's a main tank now than it is a tank destroyer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the AT-5 or front armor 5 will let you down. It's the same reason bringing Lees or Grants. You have to really think about what you're going to do with it because AT-5 is just at that. It's just not quite good enough.
Yeah.
So anyway, like was said, ATC is coming up in a day or two, so we'll be interested to see the battle reports coming out of there. Team USA all the way. Let's make our country proud.
Woo-woo.
So good luck to Tim McClellan, Benavanska, Jace Pippin, the Canadian who's masquerading as an American this weekend. So and Andrew Hobson and Igor Targason. Sorry, Igor, if I mispronounced your last name.
Or first name.
Or first name. Well, I'm pretty sure it's Igor. I did read when growing up, so it is Igor. Or Igor. I don't know.
Who won ETC last year? Was it I think it was the Russians, right?
It was the dirty Russians. Or Russians or French. I don't know. It was not Team USA.
No.
So, and I feel that we should do better this year. I think we'll do better this year. I just have a feeling, Ed. I have a feeling this is our year.
I don't think we have a dream team assembled yet, but I think we're still putting to get some good people forward.
I'm excited for the people we have going. So with the list, so the way ETC works, it's a little bit different, and on the social medias, because we know how accurate social media is. People are. I think they're looking at the list that people are saying, and like, this is the way that it's Flames War's going. No one wants to play these inaccurate lists, and a lot of people have to remember that ETC, the rules are bent just a little bit. I mean, they still use the basic same rules, but the way the games are played, the way that your matchups are made, are all set before you get there. So it's a little bit different than just going to the game store and playing a friendly pickup game. So
yeah, but they actually,
with that being said,
the teams...
it is an interesting way to see how. Go ahead.
I say when the different teams actually build their list, in the past, and I'm sure it applied this year too. No one could take the same list. They used to be, and they could have changed because now there's not as many playable nations, but no one could play the same nation either. And back when it was 4 people per team, it could be 2 people were infantry, and there was only 1 mech or 1 tank. You couldn't take, when you had the 4, you could only have either 2 tank, 2 mech, or 2 infantry, and the rest had to be filled out with 1 infantry or 1 mech or 1 tank, 1 infantry, and so forth. So I'm sure they had very similar setups this year around where no one on a team could take the same list. So, one person could take like the L6 480s and armored cars, but after that, you're left with everything but that. So not everybody can bring the same meta list.
Yep, and it is built like that. So this year you couldn't bring the same formations, and I think you could have 2 people from the same nationality. So
okay, yeah,
you could have 2 American players, 2 British players, 2 German players, 2 Soviet players, 2 Italians.
Yep.
Up to that, but you can't run the same formation twice. So you can't have 2 Honey Stewart formations on two different people's teams or something like that. So it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see how that tournament plays out. To see if infantry lists do well, if defenders do well. And that's another thing that's been talked about recently, is whether or not defenders have it good or bad, or is it indifferent. And I think that just kind of goes to the idea of what a force is designed for. And in version 4, they gave us the mission matrix, which it has its flaws, but it serves a purpose to where if I build a tank list, there's a better chance that I will attack than defend. So I like the way it works out, but there's definitely plenty of ways that as a defender you can skew your chances of winning. With reserves, having a single reserve choice, so try to get as few platoons in reserve as possible to get to your 40%. So, having a platoon of Churchills or a Tiger platoon or something like that, where it eats up so much of your points that you only have to make that one dice roll instead of, I have 15 platoons off the table. Let's see how many 5s and 6s I can roll. I can't grasp why the idea right now is that infantry or defending as a whole is not a viable way to win. I don't know. Maybe you have something.
I actually think that defending right now, let's say you have a list that is absolutely fearless, it is really just is not a winning solution. Version 4, one of the main objectives by Phil and the Battlefront studio was to make version 4 to be a fast playing game, right? And so when the version 4 first dropped, they're like, hey, we're trying to eliminate as many extra rerolls as we can. Well, they actually added rerolls in when we start talking about mistaken target and other things like that. But it led to a lot of draws. So they made singly the biggest rule change I think in the tournament scene could have been made was that if you start within 4 inches of the objective and in your turn with no defending teams contesting the objective, you've won the game. So all I got to do is assault you off. Now, in the old days, you would have a chance to come back and we'd be doing this back and forth,
until someone ran out of
troops or something like that. But the defender couldn't keep, they called it daisy chaining, sending one team in over and over again. But realistically, that was something you didn't see often. Usually people threw their whole force in just to try to get that objective back. But that makes games, we see games end round 2, round 3 now just because the attacker's like, I'm going to rush the objective as quick as I can, push them off, and then win the game. So that to me has been the biggest change.
But remember, that comes down to list construction and what you bring on the table. So, if you bring 2 platoons on the table, then yes, I'm going to rush an objective and I'm going to push you off before you can bring troops onto it. But, if you've constructed your list to have 10 platoons on the table and 2 platoons off, that changes things a whole lot.
Yeah, but there's also some lists where, you're confident but your counterattack's worse, or you maybe just flat out reluctant. I have literally won 2/3 of my games and tournaments now.
I see what you're saying, but I also, I don't know. I wish I could just have dice in front of me and we could go over it here on the show. There's just so many things you can do. Usually the defender gets an ambush and an ambush opportunity. Those PZ3, those Bogwarts, that threw you for a loop, and that almost won the game right there.
I have won 2/3 of my tournament games since version 4 has come out just by solely assaulting and having my opponent fail to counterattack. I have won one tournament as a defender, and that's when I took my Fearless Vet Fens that in early war they counterattack on a 2-up, and it was literally just making sure that I didn't fail counterattack and just stayed in the fight, and I just was unable to be pushed off the objective, and that's how I won the game.
Yeah, and also with defending, I see. So I saw this at Historicon. My first opponent was on the objective defending. His front line of troops was at the objective.
Okay.
So that's, if you're defending, if you're choosing to defend, you have to deploy your front line of defense as far forward of the objective as possible. If you're relying on that one assault as the defender, you're doing it wrong, because if I assault you and you move off the objective, that's it. The game's over. That's the way the rules are.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that your forward line of troops is, in some instances you only get 4 inches to your deployment area, but you better have infantry teams 4 inches up, right there. As the defender, sometimes spearheading into no man's land to push the deployment area ahead, if possible, that's another thing. So, having troops in contact on turn 1 is a great thing, because it means that on turn 1, your troops in contact are not the troops on the objective. It gives you time as the defender to slow down the attack, and get troops where you need them. So it's just another strategy for the defender.
Yeah, and you talk about lining up troops in front of the objective. They're almost working as speed bumps, and there's honestly, when we get to it later, in the German book, a great, in my opinion, speed bump formation that you can take. But we'll hit on that later.
Well, since you bring it up, I don't have too much more to talk about defending. Actually, I do have one more thing. So there's defense in depth and line defense. So line defense is everything up front. So these are military tactics for you. A line defense, everything up front, and it's just an impenetrable line, and you are pasting everything on that line of defense. Then there's defense in depth. And I do believe Mr. Chris Jackson wrote on this in one of his articles on NDNG. With defending in depth, you have your front line, and when they break, they run into the second line. When they break, you run into the third line. So you're talking about speed bumps. The more speed bumps you have, as those troops retreat, now you have the next line of defense with those troops that retreated. And then when they retreat, now you have your third line of defense with the first and second lines of retreated troops. So put that together with turns and turns of fire, volley fire. You're starting to whittle down the enemy as they get closer and closer to the objective. So just this actually works in real life. Try to make it work in a game.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mr. Ed Sales, you have the German book in front of you.
I certainly do.
What can you tell us about this German book that's in front of you?
So before we start talking about different lists and tactics you can do, I have been a pretty big critic of Battlefront in terms of the content. I'm used to the version 3 compilation books, or where they come up like Bridger at Moggen, or a book like that came out with all completely new lists, different styles of play that came out with it. And when version 4 hit and they put out the mid-war books, and it's just been in my opinion, just completely lackluster. I will have to say that this new German book is the best book they've put out in version 4, and the command cards that go with this book adds a lot of flavor. They talk about they want to get rid of all the special rules from version 3, and when I look at all these command cards, I got to think there's more special rules in these command cards than there were in version 3. Now, there is going to be some disappointment. There's going to be some stuff that we all expected that should have made the book, but that didn't make the book. But there's also a lot of stuff that I think people never saw coming enter the book and enter the command cards. I'm really, really impressed with this book. I mean, like I said, there's some stuff they could add, but this surpassed my expectations.
So you've seen the American book that came out not too long ago, the American D-Day. Would you say that it's on par, like formation wise and unit wise, with that?
Not
book?
at all. This one's way better, in my opinion. And I've talked to a few people, and they're like, "Oh, so what do you think about it compared to the American book?" And it's like, I don't think the American book holds a candle to this German book, and the command cards come with it. I mean, there's so much more options, so much more flavor compared to even the American D-Day book. In my opinion, it's insane. Again, it doesn't have everything that I expected. The Yag Panther's not in it. I thought the Yag Panther, this would have been a great time for it to show up. And it doesn't have Panzer by name, but you can take the Armored Panzer Grenadiers in the same color, or you can still take the 3 Panzerschrecks with it and all the other stuff that Panzer could. It's just not called Panzer, but it is Panzer.
Right. All right. So what do you think is the list you're going to take? So we look at more of the tactics and stuff. The page turns are coming. We are diligently writing our reviews of the book right now. But how do you see this book changing the late war tournament scene, Ed? Or just tactics in general? Because I know when the American book came out, going from Fortress Europe to that American book, it just makes the British players and the Soviet players really upset that they don't have as many cool toys.
Well, this we talk about defending. This has what I call a speed bump formation in it, and I want to apologize if I spoil this for our writers before they can get their articles out. The beach defense formation just has me drooling of the possibilities. And for example, I'm just going to give you the base of what I would take. So for 3 points, you can take 5 MG42 rifle teams, right? You could take a larger platoon, but the reason I'm only going to take 5 for 3 points is for 1 point, I can add in 2, or for 1 point each, I can add 2 Panzerschrecks, right? So that gets me the platoon, 5 points with 2 Panzerschrecks and 5 rifle MG teams. But then I can add 2 HMGs for 1 point each. So for 7 points, I have 5 MG42 rifle teams, 2 Panzerschrecks, and 2 HMGs. Now I got a beefy platoon that is going to, should stop tanks assaulting me as they come in. I have enough infantry shots to stop infantry from coming in. Granted, they get hit on 3. They're confident. They have a last stand of 5, and their skill is 5 up. They're green. But I can take 3 of these in a formation with the HQ for just, 7, 7, 7, 23 points. And that's the formation. Now, you can take plenty of other stuff with it, like I can get Pack 40s that are ridiculously cheap in this formation, as well as other things. But I'm looking at taking 2 platoons or 2 formations of these, using one speed bumps blocking avenues where I'm expecting you to come through, open areas, not the forest and stuff like that. And then the other formations will just sit back and cover the objectives. It's not going to win the counterattack role, but this is just a firepower. It's got a lot of firepower.
Yeah, you're saying adding the 2 Panzerschrecks per platoon, so that's 6 Panzerschrecks per formation, so 12 Panzerschrecks on the table for 2 of them, 2 formations of them. That's a lot of mobile high AT. Yeah. So, you drop one of those guys in ambush, or just with that many Panzerschrecks running around, it's going to be hard to keep your front armor to everyone.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the defender. Now I've got to send my tanks, my armored vehicles, through those Panzerschrecks. Yeah. You got to get around them.
Yeah, and the Pack 40s, are ridiculously cheap. 3 for 8 points.
That is.
I mean, they have the same ridiculous stats. They're confident trained, but I don't really care
right
what
there having the Panzerschrecks that are that inexpensive.
Yeah, so you take these formations of the infantry. One formation was 23 points, and now you're at 46 points for 2 formations. Now you add in 2 platoons of Pack 40s, 1 for each group. That's 16 points. That gets you to 62 points. That is a lot of firepower, and you can still add more. You can add your mortars, and the heavy mortars are making a return. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff you can add, and the command cards just add oodles and oodles and oodles of flavor. It's incredible.
So is there a tank unit that you would attach to that, or would you just be happy with the amount of land-based or non-motorized based AT? Is bringing a tank in this instance a waste of points, or would you add a mobile AT into that list?
If if you're going to elect to defend, I always say you should add something mobile. And I was looking to do the Panzerlehr with this beach defense formation, with the Panzerlehr, rolling on the table, being the cavalry that comes in and saves the day, like in the Old West. But I really find that the Armored Panzer Grenadiers, the same way the Panzerlehr was with the 3 Panzerschrecks, it's pretty costly. And then I also thought about rolling Stugs with the formation, and I think that was pretty costly. I'd like to say that I'd probably just spam the infantry, honestly, and just have very large infantry force, and hope I can manage the reserves well. I'm not someone that manages the reserves well. I'm always that guy that goes, oh no, I have reserves. I didn't even think about calculating what I would put in reserve, and then trying to figure out last minute. I've never been a guy that thought of reserves well. So, there's some tournaments coming up that I definitely plan to bring my 2 beach defense formations and just say, hey, how's this going to work out?
Right. Like we were saying earlier, having that one beefy points platoon, be that, in this instance, Stugs or a Tiger or Panther platoon or some large point platoon that eats up your points, that's going to put you in the best place where you can put the most units on the field while keeping the most units that you have to roll 5s and 6s for to get them on the table. And while I was asking about your armored reserve, with bringing an infantry platoon onto the table from reserves, that's great. Now you have the platoon, but now they got to get somewhere. And running infantry across the table when the enemy's right there is just a disaster waiting to happen. But running a tank across the table, it could still be a disaster. They could still shoot you with an AT weapon, but at least they won't be machine gunning you to death. So I don't know if I would go with Tigers or PZ4s or PZ3s or something like that, but I think the Germans are uniquely set up in a way that a lot of other Allied nations are not, in the fact that the Germans have expensive tanks, which is going to help Germans defend a lot better than the Allies can, because you can build those reserve platoons and those reserve forces that are tailored to keep the most amount of stuff on the table while limiting the amount of stuff you have to roll off the table. Like I don't even envy a Soviet infantry player. Just the amount of 5s and 6s they have to roll is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I've honestly, like I say, I've never been a big fan of the large platoon and reserves. Even in reserve, I try to maximize all the points I can. But yeah, because you're talking about the Germans, one of the great things about the Germans is the wide variety of tanks they can take. I can take Tigers and Panthers. I feel the heavy tank roll or the super medium roll. I could take cheap Panzer IV, Stugs. They have a lot of variety of, what do I want to do with these points that are left over,
Mm-hmm. And I mean, not only that, but the in Fortress Europe, you can bring the Ferdinands and all that stuff still. So you can, it's a unique force, I think, with the regards to armor. Now, something else in this German book that I think people should be excited for is the Panzerfaust rule is carrying over. That's now that is a late war German thing. So, each team gets a Panzerfaust. That's just, I can't. I was talking with Mr. Chris Jackson the other day, and he was saying that it just did very well for him. You can never get rid of the Panzerfaust. It's just an amazing thing. So that's making a return in this book. That alone changes the way Germans play, infantry-wise, for the Germans. I'm flabbergasted. I wish I could do that with Piats and bazookas.
Yeah, and I there's some people that are upset that they go, hey, in X book I was able to take Fallschirmjäger that everybody had a Panzerfaust, and now you're just limiting the one. So yeah, I can understand people who took that list would be upset, but now you can move and shoot your Panzerfaust. Granted, it's at a +1, but to me that's huge. I honestly never really took platoons that everybody had a Panzerfaust in, unless it was like your Volkssturm. Because usually I would just say, oh, let me sink the points into giving the commander a Panzerfaust, and well, let me just look at how much it would cost for the whole platoon, and you add it up, and you're like, oh my god, that's so expensive for something that can only shoot 4 inches, you know.
I can almost bring another platoon of people.
Yeah, so, I think the new rule is going to work a lot better where you're playing hot potato with the Panzerfaust.
And not just hot potato, like I was saying earlier, with the, I kill your Panzerfaust, oh yay, but next turn, someone else has the Panzerfaust, so it's not like I can sit there and target one team and get rid of your AT unit. It just makes Germans that much more deadly to Allied tanks in the fact that there will always be a Panzerfaust that's hitting you. Every single turn. Be it shooting you, be it assaulting you. It's going to be there and there's nothing you can do about it, which is going to, I think in the long run, make people a little bit more hesitant to make those attacks into infantry, German infantry at least. So
yeah, you should see a lot more combined arms, armored rifles moving up with the Shermans and whatnot.
I mean, you kind of have to, because at least, a Panzerfaust swinging against infantry is not going to kill as many infantry as it does against tanks. And with that slow rate of fire, it's going to be that +1. So it's interesting. I am very glad to hear that the German book coming out is a swing out of the park, because I think we are seeing Battlefront learning from, I don't want to say learning from their mistakes, but they definitely were slow to release beefy version 4 books when Mid-War popped. But we've now had Fortress Europe, which was a nice little it's an everything book. That American book I was really impressed with. And now seeing this German D-Day book, I'm really excited to see that we're getting not just the units, because we got the units in version 4 mid-war, but I'm glad to see that we're getting some of the flavor back, some of the fluff. And while fluff is not important to the game entirely, it makes it that much more fun to play. So, be it with command cards or be it just extra junk in the book, I'm glad to see that we're getting it, and I'm glad to see that it's well represented. Now this is our second release into late war. It seemed, they're setting a good precedence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I haven't counted the command cards that are coming out, but I have to, from my initial look, I have to think that these are going to be the largest amount of command cards that have come out for any book. And there's just tons and tons of command cards that do so many different things.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, Ed, now that we've kind of gone into your defense force there, we've kind of we've come full circle. Yep. And I think that this is going to be a good release. I'm excited to play it. Speaking of excited to play, I think there are a few late war tournaments coming up in the not too distant future here, at least on the East Coast. Do you know anything about those?
I know two. Both are happening on the same weekend. First, we're going to talk about the one at Atlantis. It's going to be September 28th. It's 75 points late war. You can bring Fortress Europe, the American D-Day book, or the German D-Day book to it. Entry fee, just bring in a dish, because it's going to be like a potluck, and it's going to be at the Bearded Bird Brewery in Norfolk. It's actually quite a lot of fun. You get a lot of people in there who go there for drinks and stand around and watch the Flames War games and really get into it. It's kind of like a crowded, or not crowded atmosphere, but you get like that audience crowd if you do something well, or they're cheering you on. They don't know what they're cheering for, but it's pretty fun. Also in that same weekend in Harvey de Grace, Maryland, is going to be a mid-war and late war tournament. As I'm aware, some of the stuff is still being finalized, but it's looking to be two very high-pointed tournaments. Again, to be mid-war and late war, Harvey de Grace, Maryland, on the same weekend.
Those are taking place at BarrageCon, correct?
Yeah, BarrageCon. It should be the 27th and 28th of September.
BarrageCon is always fun. I'm just going to plug the Atlantis tournament. If anyone has never been to the Bearded Bird, the craft beers that they serve there are absolutely amazing. The environment is amazing. The games are amazing. The people are amazing. It's just a lot of fun. So if you are not going to BarrageCon that weekend, definitely come down to Norfolk, Virginia, where we can entertain you with food, booze, and flames of war. So I can't think of anything better to do on a Saturday than eat, drink, and be merry. All right, well, ladies and gents, with that, we're going to sign off on this podcast. We will be back now that we are back in the saddle. So we will be back bringing you another Tactics Talk not too long from now. So I'm going to head it over to Ed. Ed, you want to walk us out?
Once again, guys, thanks for joining us. And again, if you have any topics or any questions you have for us, just hit us up on Facebook, and we'll address them in the next podcast. This is Ed Sales, and I'm with
Austin
and
Cope.
We'll catch you next time.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory. And keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.